Welcome everyone, welcome to my studio. This is a studio I share with the painter Robert Weissenbacher, whose paintings you'll see in the back. This part of the studio shows more my work, and this is the place where I work, one of the places, the other one's up there. So as you heard, I do philosophy and art, and this place resembles this deconity a little bit. I thought before we start, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit further, because it's always a little bit difficult to grasp someone who doesn't have a, let's say, a known 9-to-5 job. I actually do have one for a certain percent of my time since a few months. But I studied philosophy, educational science and art, and did several trainings before I slowly found my way around. I work as an artist, I work as an educator, mainly in the field of teachers training. So I teach teachers how to do philosophy with children and young people, but I also do philosophical workshops with schools, and mostly with the teachers, because for me it's important to have to give impulses which carry on, which will be redesigned while they are carried on. So if you like anything I say, don't hesitate to misquote me, don't hesitate to make the things that I say your own. Lately I've started working for a foundation called Stiftung Nantes Buch, and we are working in the field of art and nature, and I'm an educational designer there, so I develop educational programs together with universities around art and nature and other topics, like, for example, mathematics. And so let's start with this presentation. I thought that to have some initial material you can work with in your mind while you listen to me, I would like to do an introductory, that's a difficult word, exercise with you, which is, you've seen these colorful cards and pencils lying around, pens. Just pick up one of them and just write down. It's really simple, and there's not going to be any grading. So just write down where in your life there's chaos, actual chaos or felt chaos, and name 1 or 2 situations, places, or contexts on the piece of paper, and briefly share them with your neighbor. And yeah, you can go ahead. It seems like this topic is quite rich. So can we maybe have like 1 or 2 spotlights on where you found chaos in your life? Just shout it in.
Try to do too many things at the same time and be focused.
So yeah, is there another place?
Basically, we agreed that our life is chaotic by itself, especially related to work and living. Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is great because we're usually so afraid of it, but if it's everywhere, we somehow have to find an answer on how to deal with it. So the second part of the exercise would be take a moment to ask yourself how the chaos you wrote down makes you feel and how you react to it, and also share this with your neighbor. You see, this exercise is trying to evoke the topic from your own experience so that you have a counterpart to what I'm going to say, and then you can critically examine whether you can apply some of it or not. I understand that you would like to discuss more, but there's a how do you call it? There's a psychological reason why I'm interrupting you right now. Is I want to keep the tension up. Like I want you to not resolve everything, because then you wouldn't listen to me, because everything's already, you've got the answers already. So I'm not trying to say that I have the answers, but I'd like to share some of mine. Specifically, I have 5 propositions which I would like to share with you. And these propositions are really, some of them might be obvious to you, or some of them might be surprising to you. And I would like to go through these 5 propositions with you, and then we can, again, spread out into discussion. So the first proposition I have is that chaos is not merely disorder. Chaos can be a structure, the quality of a process, or a feeling. If chaos would be merely disorder, it would be merely defined over our understanding of a certain structure. Like if we, for example, if I pick these pens, for example, or let's say these ones, because it's a little bit more diverse. There's also a toothbrush in here, and some charcoal, and some pen that has a nail in it. So if I pick 3 people of this crowd and I ask them to organize this, they might all organize it in a different way. They might organize it by color, they might organize it by size, they might organize it maybe by preferences, personal preferences. So as you can see, order is a rather arbitrary term. So chaos as disorder would be, let's say it would be a little bit arrogant to say chaos is disorder, because it would say that we define what the order is, and then chaos is defined according to this order. Chaos has its own quality, and there are mathematical approaches, physical approaches to try to figure out what this quality is. But there's also lyrical, a physical, creative, cultural, or a artistic approach to define what chaos is. And I think we had this quote in the introductory text that you might have read by Terry Pratchett, the fantasy writer who wrote, "When order meets chaos, chaos usually wins because it's better organized." And the idea behind this is that chaos is something which is superior, which is more natural, more generous. It is generous, not, it is more general, because it is something that we meet in life, whether we create order or not. Chaos is there anyways, but we might create some small islands of order. And these small islands, we'll come back to that, they're our comfort zones. And the second sentence here is chaos can be a structure, the quality of a process, or a feeling. I'd like to point out that chaos is not something physical. Chaos is not something that I can hold up like this glass of water. Chaos is the relation between different things, and not just different things at one moment, but also the relation between different things in one moment to another moment. So it can be the quality of a process. If you have, for example, a chaotic process which starts as really organized, and then you don't notice, but then all of a sudden it just explodes into activity. An autocatalytic process, for example, in chemistry would be such an example, where you have a certain reaction that reinforces itself, and then it becomes faster and faster. And for example, you have a haystack in hot weather like this summer, and then the composting process in there reaches an autocatalytic speed, and then the haystack bursts into flame. And there you can really, you might say, no, this is like very organized, but there might be some elements which we could call chaotic. It can also be a feeling. It can be that you walk into your children's bedroom and you say, oh my God, what a chaos. And they're like, what? This is organically grown order here. This is I remember my mom coming to my room saying like, well, what is this chaos here? Like, I'm looking for, I don't know, something. And I'd say, it's over there next to the t-shirt. Underneath there's a cap, and under the cap there's the thing that you're looking for. So what feels chaotic to us might not feel chaotic to others. And I think art is a really good example for that. Some people might see the structure in an artwork, and the person right next to them only sees chaos. And these two people then can engage into an interesting conversation. And as I mentioned before, chaos can also be a structure, which is the relation between the different elements. So this is my first proposition. My second proposition is chaos is the antidote for decadency. I really like the word decadency as much as I hate it, because it is a really big threat. It sounds so nice, and it sounds like, you know, Baroque. It sounds rich in colors. It sounds, I don't know if you've seen the Hunger Games. There's this central city, and these people are dressed up really fancily, and they have all this weird fashion, weird hair, and the city just like flows over from decadency. What is it that I mean when I talk about decadency? And I'm taking from the Brockhaus definition, which I think is one of the most beautiful definitions I've ever read. It is a degeneration by means of cultural over-refinement. And I like this definition because it's in itself, in a way, decadent. So it's in two means explaining the word decadency. Now, how would we translate this word definition? It means that we, well, let me start in another way. If we encounter chaos in our life, how do we react? We create structures, and these structures are really meaningful. They're important for our survival. For example, if I use the word danger in a completely different way each time, and there's no structure to how I use the word danger, then eventually it will lose its life-saving quality. Because I might say danger, and I mean sweets actually, or chocolate pudding, or a cloud. You know, people cannot react to it in that way that they can save themselves if I actually use the word danger in the sense of danger. So when we encounter chaos, when men or any organized life encounters chaos, they answer with setting up, developing structures, and these structures help to survive. They help to build up organized systems. They help to build up communities and societies. And this we term culture. And the culture in itself enables us to develop a certain excellency in what we do. For example, I used to cook for several different NGOs, and we had big kitchens. We were cooking for hundreds to thousands of people, and usually at home you would cut 1 or 2 zucchini, or you would cut 1 or 2 eggplants, but not more. So why would you ever think about how do I cut a zucchini, or how do I cut an eggplant? But if you actually have 2 or 3 of these, like if you, let's say this is all full of eggplants, and you have to cut them all, and you know that you'll have to cut them all, you'll start thinking about, where do I start, where do I end? And this creates a certain excellency. Just like the baker who can like tap the dough and says like, this is just right. So repetition and order creates a certain excellency. But at the same time, it also, it can choke life. And I think everyone who lives in Germany knows what I'm talking about. The administration of your own life can exceed the like the amount of energy that you put into administering your life and your projects can exceed the amount of energy that you put into living your life. And so decadency is exactly the detachment from life, the detachment from what this is all about, and the, let's say, the circling around in your own culture, in your own organization structure. And when we look at the art market, then we also see that there's a lot of decadency going on there. We also see that in the economical sector, especially in the new media and digitalization field, there's a lot of decadency going on, because it's actually not it's just about creating a new product. It's not about creating a better life for the community. Of course, this is always used as a phrase, but it's not really about that. So decadency is a real threat to life. And chaos is the wake-up call. Chaos is the reminder that what you're trying to control can never be controlled fully. My third proposition is the key skills for adapting to chaos are awareness, acceptance, creativity, and courage. So we already figured out that chaos is pretty much everywhere, and that we probably have to deal with it whether we like it or not at one point or another. May it be when I lose my job, or may it be when climate change kicks in, or may it be when children are born. So in a way, we will have to face chaos just as likely as we will have to face death. And so it makes sense to somehow find a strategy. And the key skills, as I suggest, are awareness, acceptance, creativity, and courage. Awareness, why is it important? Awareness is not focus. Awareness doesn't mean that you look at one certain thing and you just, fade out everything else. Awareness means that you have a general level of attention. And this general level of attention is not focused on something specific, it is just there. And even though you were just listening to the person in front of you, you might hear something in your back, or you might feel something under your feet. And there's some part of your mind questioning, is this a relevant information or not? And the more awareness you have, the more information from the outside you can take in and question. And therefore you might actually notice the slight hints that what you're trying to do right now is over-refinement. Acceptance. Well, we don't like change. There's a wonderful quote, and I'm going to give you some more quotes by this gentleman here, Alfred Whitehead. He was one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, even though mainly unknown to everyday folk. He was a mathematician and philosopher, and his main contribution was developing a cosmology based on process instead of on substance. So he acknowledged that the world is actually a process, that it is actually changing, and he was asking what implications would this bring. And this metaphysics is greatly growing in these days and being adapted by physicists, by therapists, by educators, by chemists, by biologists, or Buddhists. It's really one of the growing paradigms, and I hope that it will, let's say, adjust in soon. And he wrote a sentence which I really like. He said, "The world is thus faced by the paradox that, at least in its higher actualities," he means like us, for example, "it craves for novelty and yet is haunted by the terror at the loss of the past with its familiarities and its loved ones." So we are at, everyone wants to have something new. We want the next day to be different. We want the next product that we buy to be different and to be new and to be surprising. But at the same time, we're so haunted by the terror at the possibility of losing what we love. or losing what we feel comfortable at. So acceptance is, in this context, the ability to allow yourself to just acknowledge that the change that just happened, and not push it aside. And I think climate change is a really interesting example for this, because we try to just push it aside every single day, and the numbers get higher and higher and higher. And what would happen with our society if we actually had acceptance, if we would actually say, oh yeah, we are at the brink of our own extinction, and it's not about saving nature, it's about saving ourselves. If we would actually allow ourselves to accept that, what would happen in politics? What would happen in economics? What would happen in the social field? Things would change very rapidly. And so this is a very important element. The third element is kind of obvious, like things change and you need to adapt, so you need creativity. What creativity is, maybe we'll come to that later. I'm not going to give a full answer, this is a huge discussion. And courage. Well, courage, you need courage to step from the known into the unknown. I will also come to the point that the courage is relative. Like, it might take someone a lot of courage to speak in front of people, while it takes a lot of courage for others to I don't know, to not open the wine bottle. The result, if we succeed, is zest of life and true novelty. Zest of life, it's a wonderful term. You know, zest is also used for the lemon peel. And zest of life is when I sometimes imagine myself on a ship, on an old sailboat, which is in a storm, and I'm the captain, and I'm yelling at the storm and saying like, yeah, bring it on. You know, this is what I'm talking about. And true novelty is obvious too. If we embrace chaos in a way that is not just trying to hold on to our previous order, but if we embrace chaos as an important and essential quality of our lives, then we can actually come up with something that we didn't even know we could come up with. And that's what art is about in a lot of aspects, that we start something and we make ourselves a plan, but we don't follow it. And we know we're not going to follow it, but we still make the plan, and then we let go of it at the right point. That's the difficult part of it. Who was it? Pablo Picasso said, creativity is allowing yourself mistakes, and art is knowing which ones to keep. That's this point. Fourth proposition, chaos demands a rhythmic approach in order to become fruitful. Now this is the point where I pull my pen. We were talking about the comfort zone before. This is the comfort zone. It's not Czech Republic, it's the comfort zone. So if you leave your comfort zone, the first thing that happens is you start learning. This is a psychological model, I didn't invent this. Around your comfort zone, there's a learning zone, which means, it simply means in the comfort zone, I press a button and I get the result that I expect. In the learning zone, I press a button and I don't get the result that I expect, but it's something that I can somehow deal with. I'm like, okay, I can call the help desk, or I can look it up myself. And then on the outside, there is the panic zone, which means I press the button and something really incredible happens, and I'm like, okay, what's going on right now? So in our lives, we always strive, and especially in this society, we always strive to create a comfort zone. And that's good to an extent. But what happens if we stay in this comfort zone too long is the learning zone shrinks. I'm not sure if you've ever hitchhiked when you were young. For me, it was natural. I would just go out and just hitchhike around. But then after a few years of not doing it, it became incredibly difficult for me to actually think about the idea of not taking a train, which would be so much more comfortable, but actually finding a place where you can hitchhike from, and then engaging with strangers and somehow ending up at a place where you didn't want to end up and going on from there. So the learning zone actually shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, and then you you have something that looks like this. This is the comfort zone, and there's a very thin layer of, and then the panic zone is like huge. So it means that the amount, what's the term? The amount of resilience I have towards change gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So how do I actually deal with this? Because I could tell you, you know what, you should just throw yourself into chaos all the time. I wouldn't say that because I've done that, and I'm quite sure this is not the only answer. This is part of the answer. So the panic zone is important, but you don't want to end up there for good. So you need the comfort zone to recover, to create excellency, we had that before, to create familiarities, to create maybe a family, which is a place where you feel at home. And so you start from here, but then you engage into the learning zone, and my suggestion is to go here. Just like slightly cross the border towards the panic zone, but then go back to the comfort zone and just recover a little bit. And then you go out again, So this is the rhythmic approach I'm talking about. And then what happens now? What happens now? So your panic zone, I'm going to start from the center. Your comfort zone increases. Each time you do that, your comfort zone increases. There are some people who said, oh, I could never travel without such a huge luggage. But if you try several times, how's it to go out of the house without anything? And I did a...
You learn to pack better.
Yeah, you learn to pack better. You learn to get along with less. You learn to accept certain elements that you weren't able to accept before. And your comfort zone actually is starting to get rather big. Your learning zone also expands, because the more you feel comfortable with, the more you can throw yourself into new things, because you have the knowledge that it's not far to the next comfort zone. But if your comfort zone is really just like selected spots, usually the distance gets really far to get there. And the panic zone is basically a challenge. So it changes from, oh God, I mustn't go there, to when will I get the thrill again? It becomes something challenging instead of something threatening. This is the fourth proposition, and I'm going to come to the fifth proposition. The fifth proposition is flourishing life embraces and plays, there's a typo there, with chaos. And I think there should actually be, is there something else coming? No. Is there? Sorry. Yeah, there's some quotes coming. I'm sorry. So this is now, I think it should be clear out of what I said before, that flourishing life isn't chaos. Flourishing life isn't trying to avoid chaos. Flourishing life embraces and plays with chaos. And I would like to back this up again with some quotes by Alfred Whitehead. He said, the contrast between order, like one of the essential contrasts that we need to understand is the contrast between order as the condition of excellence and order as stifling the freshness of living. I think I've already explained this element before. Then he continues, he says, order is not sufficient. What is required is something much more complex. It is order entering upon novelty, so that the massiveness of order does not degenerate into mere repetition. This is decadency. Decadency is celebrating this repetition. And so that the novelty is always reflected upon the background of system. And now you can understand what I said, that the learning zone becomes so much bigger now. The novelty that I face it on the background of my experiences in dealing with novelty. And so I can actually adjust much faster, because I don't just have a skill of having a big comfort zone, I also have the skill of knowing how to deal with stuff that I don't know how to deal with. And that's an important skill. And as our life in this society is becoming more and more controlled, more and more documented, if you look at all the documentation through data collecting technology, less and less areas are unknown, but throwing yourself into the unknown is actually what gives you the skill to know how to deal with the unknown. That's kind of the issue. And he concludes, or this is my concluding quote here, is the art of progress is to preserve order amid change and to preserve change amid order. And even though in none of these quotes he mentions chaos, I think, I hope that through my presentation it has been clear that chaos is a key element in this development of the self, of the creative self. And thank you.
Thank you. We are opening the floor to some questions. Did something intrigue you? Want to get a little bit further? Do you have any questions? Did something inspire you? Feel free to ask.
I went to a lecture on diversity the other few weeks ago, and I'm English, and there was a big cultural discussion about the difference in the way that different cultures deal with order.
Yeah.
And they spoke about the Latino, the African countries, and how the structure of the day, the life, is chaotic, but it's creative. Whereas a lot of other countries like Germany and France and European countries, there's a lot more order.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that I think that being English and living here, this is a kind of like chaos for me, because you're restricted. A lot of people want this order to also show that they are in a place where it's a protection. It's a protection. They don't want to show that they're chaotic.
Yes.
Whereas I feel that I'm next to everybody without even speaking a lot of the time. This chaotic mess next to them, because they look so groomed and so together, and their work is so together, and they don't break out of this kind of way of being. And I can't even begin to be like that. So
may I ask how long you've lived here?
Well, I lived here before for 8 years. I worked for Adidas in Herzogenaurach in Germany, and this was an international spirit and feel, because I worked with so many different people. But in Munich, I've been here 3 years now. And
well, Munich is a special.
It's very
place.
special, and there is a lot of very smartness, and I turn up with food stuck to me, and I always feel a little bit. I remember being in a meeting and everybody's shirt was Reinigung ironed. Mine was ironed by myself, and I was like.
Okay, I see. Well, let me pick this up. I've got a lot of experiences which resemble the same struggle. One particular experience was that I was in Spain, and I was really annoyed that when people told me that they're going to be there in 5 minutes, they would come in 25 minutes. And I was talking to a Colombian, and I said, "Man, how Spanish people deal with time, I really cannot deal with that." And then she said, "Yeah, right, it's so annoying." And I said, "Yeah, like, how do you deal with that?" And she says, "I don't know how to do this, they always want you to be on time, and it's like, it's really stressful. And in Colombia, you say, let's meet, and then you might meet or you might not meet." And I was like, okay. And I just didn't elaborate much more. And I'd like to point out that I think that every life form has its own quality, especially when you move out of Germany or when you travel to other countries. I sometimes really, really enjoy the liberty and the dirt and the chaos on the side of the street. But at the same time, you would like the traffic to be safe. You would like to be the buses of time. You would like the buses to be on time. And you would like the administration to be proper and not corrupt. And so in a way, you cannot really say one is better than the other, but you can define certain, let's say, certain needs of yourself. And I think we need to make sure that these needs are being met. And especially when I'm talking about the artists living and working in Munich, these needs are not being met because of real estate situation. There are very, very few studios. We're really lucky to have this space here, but also we got, let's say, we got our issues here, which has to do with our society not acknowledging that there are certain fields, which is the social field, the cultural field, and maybe the medical field, which will never bring any profit. They will always be a field where you put money in, but you're not going to get the money out, but you're going to get life quality out. And we don't have a category for this in our society. So we just think that everything needs to make money. And if you own a place, and there would be some rooms which would be really cool for artist studios, you have to understand that if you rent them out to artists, you're going to earn less than when you rent them out to someone who actually has a regular income. So the thing is, when you have a chaotic structure, when you have, let's say, 3/4 or half of the city is just completely disorganized anyways, then the artists will find their way around. But if you have a very organized system, which I really like, I think we have a great base for a society in Germany, especially with our constitution, with our political system, also with our acceptance of diversity. There's a lot of civil courage to support diversity, much more than in other countries. But at the same time, we don't really have the economical structures and the mindset of the administration to support this diversity. And so, in a way, you always need to find your balance personally, institutionally, and as a society. And it's a current struggle. It's a constant struggle. And I really hope that this model kind of opens up an understanding for why we need change, why we need diversity. Because if I face someone in a store or on the street and I really need an information, but this person doesn't speak my language, this might be panic zone for some people. But if you live in a multicultural state and everyone's used to it, it's fun, you know? And so this is what I'm talking about. We need to change our attitude towards differences, towards change, towards chaotic structures, and we need to see the quality in them. And right now I see every time if something happens to someone, for example, a teacher who allowed his kid to climb on the tree, because I think children should learn how to climb, and this teacher or this educator thought the same thing, and the kid falls down and it breaks his or her leg, then there's a huge debate if there should be more rules. And I think this is so stupid. I think there should be a huge debate on how can we accept more self-responsibility of the children and the educators, and how can we create a society which is safe on one side, but also fosters openness and danger. I'm thinking about Janusz Korczak, who said that the child has a right to its own death. He meant the child has the right to live its life to the fullest, even though this will include danger. And this is a very important debate when we talk about education, but also when we talk about other fields of our society.
In your opinion and based on your experience, which are the fields of the comfort zone that is not really good to stay in comfort zone? Because as you said, some parts is really important, like to have a good politics system, or like the bus and the train is coming on time, so it's important for the structure of life. But of course, some parts, they are not so good to keep in the comfort zone. And also, which parts of the panic zone do you think it's better to play with?
Well, to your first question, I wouldn't say that there are certain elements which are not good to be in the comfort zone. Maybe specifically as an artist, I would say if your artistic technique is in the comfort zone, or let's say the way you develop your artworks is in the comfort zone, then you're not going to be a good artist, because you're going to reproduce yourself all the time. But if you turn it around, you can define certain elements which are very important to be in the comfort zone. For example, let's say gender equality, or low corruption or no corruption, better, or knowing that when I go out on the street at night, there's not going to be any life danger out of various reasons. So if these things, they can really stay in the comfort zone, and even though it's important to sometimes question that it's not like that in other countries, because when you go to another country, you might just walk out at night and you're just like, nothing's going to happen. So you need to question this. Anyways, I would still opt for these things staying in the comfort zone. Other than that, I would say that anything can be a good comfort zone. For example, for me, my comfort zone is here also, working, even though it's a very chaotic work sometimes, but it's really, I'm by myself and I focus on my things. For other people, it might be being with people, being in a crowd. So I wouldn't really say which things are not good in a comfort zone. Panic zone, I think, I really like social situations as panic zones, because you can always withdraw. For example, I wouldn't suggest to everyone that they should give a talk in front of people, but slowly stepping up from talking in a small group, talking in a little bit bigger group, talking in front of a school class, then talking in front of let's say your work colleagues. It gives you a certain, let's say, a certain sovereignty, a certain balance in social communication. I'm not sure if you remember this before we all had WhatsApp and smartphones. We had this thing, the home phone, and the landline, and we'd have to call the office of some administration and or the parents of a friend of ours or so, and we would sometimes rehearse in our mind what we're going to say, and now we just write an email or we just write some text. And I think this is an important exercise to communicate and to go out there and to communicate or talk to strangers is another example. That's what I'm trying to say. I think a really good element of the panic zone, if you have it in your panic zone, maybe it's in your learning or your comfort zone, but if it is in your panic zone, then talk to people and try to find a way to approach someone who you would rather shy away from, and then try and then see what happens. And most of the time it doesn't explode, or there's no stabbing happening or something like that. So there's 3 questions. I'm going to start over there.
I was wondering about the learning zone. Like if you're, for example, trying to find your creative self or start getting self-employed, getting your business running, it's a constant learning, like each day. So you're basically almost never in your comfort zone. This also implies that it's kind of a restless time, which you can feel, I think, physically, mentally. Do you have any good tips, or how does learning zone feel for you, or how do you think?
Question to that,
Yeah.
so you can answer. Were we finished?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, how does this affect your social surrounding? Because I think it's really hard to define yourself when you're too much out of your comfort zone. Because as I experienced that people like you in your comfort zone because you can tell them what you do, what you are, where you are, and other than this, always rhythmic change and so how do you communicate this to people if you live this way?
Yeah, and maybe you shouldn't underestimate these parts. I personally would say, make sure that you have those parts. They're so essential. And may it just be your coffee corner with your couch, or may it be if you, let's say, if you have a lot of construction going on at home, finish one room, keep it clean, don't enter with shoes. Have one place that is your comfort zone, and make sure that you visit this place and that you revive this place regularly, so that you have a place where you can just say, here it's just me, and I don't need to adjust to anything. If you don't have these places, the comfort zone will wear you out. So please make sure you have a comfort zone. I'm not like I've been working in refugee camps, and and also as an artist, of course, sometimes you just have extremely long passages of learning zone, close to panic zone, and then you're really close to, like, every little pinch can make you tip. So you need those comfort zones, and please make sure that you have them. And then you can let's say, from there, always ask yourself, am I ready to go back out again? So the idea is really to challenge yourself without let's say you're on a balancing line, like you're on a line that how's it called? A tightrope. You're on a tightrope. It makes a huge difference whether you have a net underneath or not. So make sure you have that net, and then you can balance and dance on the tightrope. Did this answer both of the questions? Not really yours. So can you maybe repeat your question, or?
How do you communicate it with people when you're not so much in the comfort zone?
Are you trying to say?
How do you define yourself when you are when you're changing? In change all the time, you know, when you're not in this solid definition. Yeah.
Well, I think this might sound a little bit weird, but I think it's very important to have a narrative that I can use. Like, for example, I've started at this foundation, and the foundation is in a big changing process. And a lot of times people ask me, so what do you do there? Or what is this foundation about? And I'm like, we do this and we do that, and we've got this really awesome place close to Bad Heilbrunn, and there's this stuff happening, and I just start babbling on. And so I think it's very important to have a standard narrative that you adjust regularly, but a standard narrative that is as close to the truth as possible, but also as clear as possible, so that people can say, oh yeah, that sounds cool. Or I understand what you're doing right now, or I understand what you're going through right now. So this narrative, it's kind of like when you read a newspaper, there's the headline, and then there's this small text on top. You should have the small text on top, even though you're constantly changing. Like, look at me. I don't even know if I would call myself an artist or if I would call myself a philosopher. I would say that I do art and I do philosophy. But I somehow need to find a sentence or two or three that will explain what I do and why I do it, so that people will not think like, what's this guy? He's like everything and nothing at the same time. So I think that, and in adjusting this narrative regularly, you could even have a routine of, I don't know, every quarter of the year you ask yourself, how do I present myself? This arbitrary now. Then you can actually also follow up changes in your development, because a lot of times when we're in the learning zone for a long time, things change constantly, but we don't see it because we're always busy with the present day and with the present project. And then we look back and we're like, hey, what did I do? I did this and this and this and this. Wow, it's actually pretty cool. And so you add that to your narrative and you drop out some other things, and your narrative becomes more you, becomes closer to who you are. And maybe sometimes through the narrative, you learn something about yourself because you speak it out loud. I am doing this. I am an educational designer. I'm an education designer. You know, I design educational programs. I'm an educator and a designer. I don't know. If you figure out which combination of words would be closest to how you feel what you do, then you might actually figure out what should be on your what's it called there? Your business card. You know, you can figure out what you can tell your parents. What's your current job, even though your current job is constantly changing. Yeah. So in a way, this would be my answer. Is this answering your question? Okay. There was one more question, or should we?
Really?
I think we're running
okay.
out of time, but I guess Sinan is gonna stay here around, so in case you have some more questions, please go talk to him, discuss even among yourselves. We still have some muesli here, some coffee, please help yourself. But a big thank you to you, Sinan. It was an amazing talk. I hope that you all got it as inspired as I. I want to go out there and try and push the borders between the panic zone and learning zone and comfort zone, and try to see if I find the right moment when to switch from one to another. So I think we all got quite a lot of inspiration today to start this Friday in a great way. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the partners without whom we wouldn't be able to host this great event. Subscribe to our newsletter so that you get a notification when there is a new talk, and bring your friends to the next session. Let's grow the community here in Munich, and let's make it more creative. Thank you so much.